In 10 months' time, we've moved 8 or 9, depending on how you count them, vaccines forward into phase 3, the final stage of testing for safety and effectiveness. And that's really a remarkable task given the fact that we knew absolutely nothing about this virus in December of 2019. So we have made a lot of progress. We're still waiting to see the results, and our fingers are crossed.
We've heard a lot about the ethics of the breakneck speed with which scientists are rushing to find the vaccine. Do you have any reservations about the speed with which we're rushing into this?
So I think the speed is appropriate. And the reason I think it's appropriate is that those countries and companies that are following what we call good clinical practices, which is an international standard for scientific integrity and ethical conduct of trials, as long as they're following that, then we should have a way forward that includes the kinds of safeguards that we normally associate with the vaccines that are used in the UK or in Europe or in North America. We will still use the same targets for the efficacy, for whether the vaccine is working to protect against disease or infection. We will still have at least 2 months, if you look at the US FDA guidance, of safety data on vaccines before even an emergency use authorization is considered. So, the bulk of safety events occur within the first 2 months. So again, the US FDA is being conservative and in trying to evaluate these vaccines as best they can, given the fact that to balance against the speed with which we're going, the incredible human tragedy that's been wrought by this pandemic, with millions of people infected and 1 million people or more now who've succumbed to the virus, we really have to move forward with a vaccine solution, given the fact that so many countries are now in the second wave of what seems to be a major new set of infections and hospitalizations.
But the worry, the concern is, in some countries, the decision to go ahead with that vaccine may be political more than medical, because there is a race to be first past the post. And in that race, when do you think we will see the first vaccine past that post?
So I still think that the target of seeing evidence of safety and efficacy by the end of this year or early next year is a reasonable one, actually not for one, but maybe for several of the vaccine candidates. I think that the idea that this is a race is not correct, because is the prize going to go to the first company that generates evidence of safety and efficacy, or is it really going to go to that group that will be able to deploy hundreds of millions of doses of a safe and effective vaccine at a reasonable cost and really begin to impact the epidemic? And I think it's going to be, we're going to have to manufacture high quality vaccine at a reasonable price, and we're going to have to get it out there. We're going to have to take it the last mile and inject it into the arms of people who need it.
And how difficult is that distribution process going to be, do you think?
Yeah, I think the head of WHO was right when he said, the vaccine itself is not the silver bullet. There's a huge amount of work that will need to go into distributing this vaccine to 8 billion people, which will mean that the vaccine needs to be transported under appropriate conditions, and most vaccines need to be refrigerated, so somewhere between 2 and 8 degrees centigrade, and then have to be injected. And we're talking not only about injecting children, which we're actually pretty good at worldwide these days. We're talking about injecting adults and teenagers. And how are we going to get these populations together safely and vaccinate them? And how are we going to collect information about whether the vaccine is having any adverse events as we go from tens of thousands of people in the clinical trials?
Well, I'm hoping that you will answer all those questions.
I hope to be a part of the solution. I think everyone who works on vaccines views COVID-19 as a particular challenge. We've been asked to develop a vaccine technology in really an amazingly short period of time. And the companies and countries and organizations have banded together and really done a remarkable job at trying to get out a vaccine that meets the standards for safety and efficacy that we would apply to other vaccines. And the fact that companies and countries are working as quickly as they can will make it look like a race. And maybe we'll have more than one vaccine at the end of the day.
Well, that's what that was my question, actually, Dr. Kim. I wonder if we will need more than one vaccine.
So one vaccine would be great. If there were more than one vaccine that were proven to be safe and effective, then we'd have a problem that would also be good to have, which is how do we use these different vaccines? How are they different? Actually, when you think about it, proving that the vaccine works is one thing, but what do you do the day after efficacy is shown? So when you wake up the next morning after the announcement, are you going to say, I'm going to just go out and get my jab and that'll be done with it? No, actually, there are a huge number of questions. How are we going to make it in quantity, with high quality? How are we going to distribute it and give it to 8 billion people? But then there are a whole series of scientific questions. We did move quickly through vaccine development, so we didn't necessarily have time to optimize the dose or the schedule. Maybe it's not good to give vaccines, or maybe it's better to give a vaccine at month 0 and month 6 rather than month 0 and month 1. We had to do some things, and so there is going to be some optimization. There are new vaccines, a second generation or a third generation of vaccines that are behind this first generation, and maybe those will be better. We don't know. But how will we test them? There are other questions around, whether we can develop understanding of how the vaccines actually protect, what we call a correlative protection, because that will make it much quicker and cheaper to evaluate new vaccine candidates. And then finally, these questions around licensure or emergency use authorization, as you point out, they shouldn't be political. They should be scientific and medical. And most countries have, or organizations like the EMA have a set of rules that they follow. And these rules look at safety and efficacy. So as much as possible, in order to assure people that the vaccines that we're going to be giving on a worldwide basis are safe and effective, we have to use science and not politics as the measure.